machine all set up for sewing the applique. I am using my Bernina. It's an old Bernina, a Virtuoso 153. It can do some adjustable stitches. It's pretty simple. So I just have it set to a number 2 zigzag for my machine. It'll just depend on what yours is. It's a very small zigzag, so I am using my 37 foot because the zigzag is so small that I'm using it can fit between the toes of this foot. Since this zigzag is tiny, use a foot that will give you the sense of control that you need. If you have a Bernina, use the 37. I highly recommend it. If you have other brands, use a zigzag foot that maybe it has a smaller opening here if possible. If not, you'll be just fine. This is just my preference. I have the sulky already threaded into the top of my machine as well as in my bobbin. If your machine does not like monofilament, go ahead and put a polyester thread into the bobbin. That's, say, an 80 weight. 50 weight's a little bit heavy, maybe 60, but 80 weight's really nice, like a Wonderfill type of thread or other brand. But do make sure it's polyester because the monofilament is polyester as well. I have my machine embroidery needle. It's a Schmetz 7511, and I have several other videos talking about needles, but just real quick, the Schmetz machine embroidery needle is heat tempered, the eye is polished, and it is a ballpoint needle, so it will work really nicely for the applique because it won't shred the threads as easily because of the polished eye. It's heat tempered, which will stand up to deflection, changing directions, those types of things, and the ballpoint of it will protect my fabric so I won't shred fibers and have issues with that. So I'm going to start right in the middle. You can start really, the middle section. I prefer to start on the edge of a piece and then come back to it rather than to start right in the center. I'm going to put my foot down and make sure that the toes, as you can see here, are straddling the applique piece. And I'm going to have the needle go into the background and then into the applique, into the background, into the applique. And I'm also going to show you how we manage the corners with a zigzag stitch like this when we get there. And I'm working on a curve, so I'm going to kind of stop and start as I go to adjust for the curve. And in order to do that, I do have my needle set in needle down position. So when I stop sewing, it will be in the needle down. I've got my tail of my thread back here, and then my bobbin thread is underneath and going to the back of the machine as well. And I'm just going to leave them a tail and take a stitch, and you can see it's pretty small. I'm going to actually increase my width. So on my stitch length and width, I have it set to about a 1 width and a 1 length, and my top tension is set between 0 and 1. The bobbin tension is going to be really up to you and what thread you're using in your bobbin. So if you're going to use the sulky, you're going to want to adjust that bobbin tension. If you don't want to adjust your bobbin tension, use a different polyester thread than the sulky. So I'm taking a stitch on each side. And as I come down here, I'm coming down to the point. What I'm going to try to do is hope that my needle will land. Oh, look at that. It landed right in the point. That's exactly what I wanted it to do. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate it so that the zigzag will lock in at the point, and then pick up the foot and rotate it again so it goes back into that hole. Oh man, I could not have planned that better. This isn't going to happen every time, but when it does, it sure is magical. And then we'll continue around. Now what I'm going to do is come around, we're going to kind of make a loop around each of the shapes so we don't have to stop and start, and then we'll end up back where we began. we'll continue on down, and when I get closer to this intersection, what I'm going to do is come around this piece to this point here, back around, and then loop around this piece, come around, and then I'll loop around this piece the same way, which will bring me back around to where I started, which is right here. And then it secures this intersection because I'm just continuing to sew over it, and it will be secured additionally by going over the intersection when I go around those pieces as well. Now take your time as you're sewing this, especially if you are new with using the monofilament or the adjustable zigzag stitch for applique. Okay, I'm coming up to that point again. Let's see where it stops. Oh, stopped off. So when it stops off, I'm going to rotate it and do a stitch back on, rotate it again, and then stitch off at the point. It's a little, it takes a few steps, but it usually works out really nicely to do it that way, and your point will be nice and secure and won't pop out of your stitches. All right, and then I'll continue through the center just like I did before, so it'll just kind of go right around this piece here. Alright, now if your tails get in the way, you probably didn't even see that because it's clear. But just kind of scooch it back so it goes back where it's supposed to. And those tails should stay. So let me talk about the tail real quick. Do keep your tail there because we are going to pull that to the back of the piece after we're done. Actually, just before I get there, I like to pull it back. Coming to another point here. Alright, I slow down. Ooh, let's see. Oh, nice. Oops. Oh, well. I just did an extra stitch, so I'll back that up, get it back in there. It's nice when I can go back in that same spot. It really secures that point nicely. And then sew right through that intersection again. Coming to our point. All right. Through that intersection. Now if you ever sew off the edge on accident, just stop your sewing and jump stitch back to where you left off. Especially with the clear, you won't see it, but if it's color matched, you may want to take out a few stitches, but it's pretty easy to fix. So as I'm coming close to the start, I have my tail here, which you can kind of see there. That's a little bit better. I'm going to cut it, so it's about 1 inch long. And then from the back side, I'm going to find the tail of my bobbin. All right, so now I've got my bobbin thread in my fingers here. I know you can't see it very good. So I'm going to give it a little tug and pull that top thread back. Now, really, you can do this at almost any time in the sewing process. See, now it's gone to the back. I would do it before you get this close to the end, like maybe back here. I just was sewing and just kept going. It just makes it much easier to pull back. Now it's back underneath the back of the quilt, and I can continue sewing to the end. And then when I get to the beginning, I'm going to stitch past just a couple of stitches and lock my stitch. And I lock my stitch by dropping my feed dogs. I have a little button on my machine, makes it pretty easy. And then it's just stitch back and forth, and it kind of makes it into a little knot. And now I can pull out my threads. So I'm going to cut this one about 1 inch as well. And then on the back side, let's flip that over so you can see it real good. Okay, so here's my bobbin thread. You see that? And then I'm going to give it a little tug, and then the top thread will, you see that? See the little loop right there? There we go. Oh, look at that. So then the top thread comes out really easily. That's what the other one will do when you are able to do it a little bit sooner than what I did. But that's what we want. We want those threads to be on the back side, and leave them about 1 inch or so long, because they will just bury themselves into your batting when it's quilted, and then they won't find their way back to the front of your piece. Now we're ready to sew the appliques that are along the border of the garden pond block. So to get started on that, I'm going to start just in the middle of one of the orange peel pieces on any of the sides. It really doesn't matter where you start. I am going to end up where I started by just kind of following the edges of the pieces and looping around the pieces at the corner. So as I'm sewing, just follow along with me. And we'll start our first stitch here. You can backstitch or lock stitch here, but because I'm coming back to where I started, I will be doing that at the end. So I don't worry about it too much at the beginning, but it's up to you. And then as I'm coming to the point here, I'm going to continue sewing on this curve as if it just continues naturally, instead of stopping at the point and then going back around this piece. It makes this part of the sewing go a little bit quicker and more smoothly. Of course, if you prefer to go around each point, you are welcome to. And do adjust as you go. Okay. All right, I am coming to a point here, and when I get to this point, I am going to pivot to stitch around this piece at the corner, and then come back here, and then I'm going to follow around the outside edge of the applique here. So I'm coming to the corner, I'm going to stop off of the edge, turn my piece all the way around so the needle is on the outside edge of the point of the corner piece, and then it will just naturally start to go straddling that piece on either side. the point here. So we'll work the point just like we've done before. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 adjustments, kind of just depends on where the needle lands. Now I've come back to this point. So as I finish up at the point of the piece here in the corner, I'm going to start sewing on the outside edge of the next applique pieces. As I come to this point, this part is a new position. So we're going to come to the point up here, and I'm going to land off of the point in between these 2 pieces. So if you don't land there naturally, just turn your hand wheel a turn to get the needle to go to the outside or to the right hand side. Then lift up your foot, rotate, and see what happens when it's on the right is it's already on the outside of the next piece, so it will zig and zag correctly on and off of the piece. Okay, we're back at the intersection of another corner with 3 appliques. I'm going to stop at that point of the first one again, and I'm going to stop to the right or off of the point and work around this corner piece. Okay, so now I'm on the right hand side, so the next stitch will land right on the applique and secure the point. Then we'll come back around and secure it again. Alright, I landed off the point, so my next stitch is going to be onto the applique, and then rotate off of the applique, rotate just a smidge, back on. I know the corners can seem like they're a little fussy or time consuming, but it's really worth it to secure that point so it doesn't come out of the stitching. I ran out of bobbin up here while I was chatting. So here, this is a really good little trick and something to point out. So what I'm going to do is clip my top thread at about 1 inch, just like I did when I actually stopped before. And on the back side where my little bobbin tail is, so let me find it. The linen is kind of hard to see the bobbin tail, but this little loop right here. So I'm going to pull on that, and that helped me pull the top thread. Actually, that was a loop for the top thread, so that worked out well. The bobbin tail is really short, and now I have my top thread to the back, so it's nice and finished. And when I start, I am going to lock my stitch once or twice right here just to secure it, because I'm not coming back to that spot again. I'm going to change out my bobbin and we'll get started again. I have my bobbin all set up again, and we're going to get it started right where I left off. And I'm going to just lock stitch. And again, lock stitch is when I drop my feed dogs, and then it just stitches back and forth in the same exact position. And you can back stitch if you prefer. Gotten almost all the way back to the beginning, which is right here. So before I get any closer, I'm going to clip that top thread, and from the back we'll get that bobbin thread, and here it is. And when you pull on that bobbin thread and you give it a little tug but not too hard, that top thread will loop back, and then you can pull it through just like that. And then give them both, make sure they're both trimmed about 1 inch, and then you can finish sewing. Oh, you know, and in retrospect, probably wouldn't have, if I had thought about it a little bit more, probably wouldn't have started on the side. I may have wanted to start at a point. If I had started here at a point and then ended at that point, I could pivot and then start going down on the outside edge of the applique pieces, and it would have been much more continuous and would have eliminated a stop and a start. But it will work out just fine this way. But if you want to do that, you certainly can. All right, pivot on that inside. come back to where I started, so I'm going to lock my stitch, drop my feed dogs, and I'll just go back and forth a couple of times. And then I can pull out my thread, give it some slack, cut that top thread to about 1 inch or so. And on the back side, again, before you cut it, so you know which bobbin thread is which, pull on it, get your little loop pulled back. If the loop doesn't pull back very easily, get a little straight pin or tweezers and kind of just nick at it and see if that worked, and now it comes right back to the back. Clip your threads. I'm going to go ahead and start here, and then we'll finish up there. Alright, we are now going this direction. I have the bulk of my quilt on the inside of my machine. So when that happens, you'll need to kind of just manage it a little bit, and I like to bunch it and kind of keep it in my hand and almost use it to help me steer. Oops, I fell off the edge. Did you see that? So when I fell off the edge, I'm just going to bring my needle up, jump stitch back to where I fell off the edge, which is about here. And start again, and then I'll just stitch over this thread that is up, and nobody will know. Won't be visible at all. Right, back to the beginning again, and I'll lock my stitch in. And give myself some slack. Cut that top thread to 1 inch. Go to the back, and again, before cutting that bobbin thread, give it a little tug. See, the loop already came out. See there? There it is. And then that top thread will come back right to the back of the piece. Double check that it did, in fact, do that. And then just trim your bobbin thread. And it's done. All of the orange peel appliques are applied to the quilt, and I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. Let's take a closer look here. You can see the applique stitching is virtually invisible. And as we add borders to the quilt, they will help, they will stay stable, they won't shift or move. And once the quilt is quilted and you're using it and loving it, the applique will, the foundation inside of the applique will soften. You can quilt through it, you can sew through it, whether you do it by hand or by machine. And it's really versatile. You can use the foundation also for foundation piecing. And when, as I was saying about it softening up, with use, wear, and wash, it keeps getting softer and softer. There's no need to cut it out, and it will stay put. It doesn't bunch up and settle in your pieces either. So I hope you've enjoyed this month with applique. We do have one more applique month with the hexagons coming up in the Gardens block of the month. So please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you all for month 3 when we work on the lattice wall. When we work on the lattice wall. When we work on the lattice wall border, that will be really pretty X's that surround our orange peels. See you soon.